At 2:14 in the morning, a company worth $11 billion stopped functioning. Not because of an explosion, not because of a fire, because of a text file, a ransom note written in broken English, demanding $40 million in Bitcoin within 72 hours. This is not fiction. The FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center has logged ransomware losses exceeding $1 billion a year in the United States alone, and that figure only reflects the cases companies were willing to report. Cybersecurity researchers have a name for what happens in the hours after that note appears. They call it the helplessness gap. The exact moment a Fortune 500 legal team realizes their multi-million-dollar security budget bought them nothing but a countdown clock. Somewhere inside that network, an intruder had already been living for 18 days before anyone noticed, watching, mapping, waiting, learning exactly which files were worth the most and exactly how much this company could afford to lose. This is not a smash and grab. This is a home invasion where the intruder moves into the attic first, studies the household's every routine, and only comes downstairs once every exit has already been sealed. By the time the CEO's phone rang at 2:14 that morning, the decision had already been made, without her. What she did in the next 72 hours would decide whether this company survived and whether paying the ransom made the next attack on someone else even more likely. To understand how $11 billion of infrastructure fell in a single night, you have to understand that the intruder never broke down a door. They were handed a key, and nobody noticed the handoff. Security professionals call it phishing, but that word is far too gentle for what it actually is. Imagine a stranger mailing you a photograph of your own house, your own car, your own children, and asking you, quite politely, to open the door. That is what a targeted phishing email looks like from the inside. Somebody, somewhere inside that company, clicked it. Statistically, in an organization of 10,000 employees, someone always does. It is not a failure of intelligence. It is a failure of odds, and the attackers understood the odds better than the company ever did. From that single click, the intruder did not immediately attack. They waited, watched, and quietly climbed through the network the way water finds every crack in a foundation, moving sideways from one machine to the next until they reached the systems that actually mattered. This is the part that should genuinely unsettle you. The average American hospital, water utility, or mid-sized manufacturer runs on infrastructure decades older than the threats now aimed at it. Patched together, underfunded, and defended by security teams a fraction the size they actually need to be. It took 18 days for the intruder to find what they were looking for, and only 4 hours to take it. Backup systems encrypted, disaster recovery servers locked, the company's own insurance documents read in full, so the attackers would know precisely what ransom the policy could actually cover. It was a junior analyst reviewing overnight logs who first noticed something that did not belong. A server that should not have existed was quietly moving data out of the network in the dead of night to an address that traced back to nothing at all. Digital forensics investigators have a term for a machine like that. They call it a ghost server, a system built specifically to exist for a matter of hours, move what it needs to move, and then erase every trace of itself before anyone thinks to look. By the time anyone from the security team picked up a phone to call their incident response firm, the intruder was no longer inside the network stealing information. They had already left, and they had taken something no one in that building yet realized was gone. What the incident response team found when they finally traced that ghost server back to its source was not what anyone in that building expected. This was not a lone hacker in a basement. This was a company. Investigators call it Ransomware-as-a-Service, a criminal franchise model where the people who build the malicious code never touch the target themselves. They lease it, the way a company might lease software, to affiliates who split the ransom in exchange for doing the breaking in. There were help desks, there were customer service ratings, there were internal performance reviews for affiliates who failed to extract a high enough ransom. The entire operation ran with the discipline of a Fortune 500 company, because in every measurable sense, that is exactly what it had become. And here's the detail that should genuinely disturb you. Even after the ransom was paid, even after the decryption key arrived exactly as promised, forensic investigators discovered that a second piece of code had been left behind, dormant, waiting for a future date that had not yet arrived. This is what security researchers call a sleeper payload, malicious code with no immediate purpose except to guarantee the door stays unlocked long after everyone believes the crisis is over. Paying the ransom had not ended the intrusion. It had only postponed the next one. The company's own outside counsel had advised paying quickly and quietly, calculating that a $40 million wire transfer was cheaper and far less damaging to shareholder confidence than 60 days of public disclosure obligations under state breach notification law. Nobody in that room was breaking the law. That is what makes this so unsettling. Every decision made in those 72 hours was technically legal, and every one of them left the public completely in the dark about a breach that had already reached far beyond that single company's walls. Because the sleeper payload had not stayed contained to one network. It had already replicated itself into 3 vendor systems connected to that company's supply chain. And none of those vendors had been told a breach had ever occurred at all. Somewhere out there, right now, that dormant code is still sitting inside systems nobody has thought to check, waiting for a trigger date no one outside that criminal organization has ever seen. And that is the question this story cannot yet answer. Whose network is it waiting in tonight? Today, that company still operates, still profits, still tells its shareholders the incident was fully contained. The affiliate believed responsible for the breach was never identified. The developers behind the ransomware platform simply rebranded under a new name and kept leasing their software to someone else. The 3 vendor companies whose systems were silently compromised still do not know it happened. Somewhere in their infrastructure, dormant code is still waiting, and no forensic audit has ever been conducted to find it because no one has ever told them to look. In the years since, several states have passed stricter breach disclosure laws, and federal regulators have proposed rules requiring companies to report ransomware payments within days rather than months. But as of this recording, no federal law requires a company to tell the public when it pays a ransom at all. So consider for a moment the device sitting in your hand right now, or the laptop open in front of you. Somewhere behind an ordinary-looking email, an invoice, a shipping update, a message from someone you almost trust, the same 18-day silence could already be underway. We built a civilization that runs on code none of us can see, maintained by systems most of us will never understand, defended by budgets that were never enough to begin with. And somewhere in that invisible architecture, someone is already inside, patiently waiting for the right moment to stop pretending they were never there. If you want to understand how a single line of code brought down an entire nation's power grid in under an hour, that story is waiting for you next.